Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll, was known for his electrifying performances, shows that left audiences breathless and always wanting more. His charisma was undeniable, his voice legendary, and his energy on stage unmatched. But on one unforgettable night in Las Vegas, something happened that no one could have ever predicted. As the lights flashed and Elvis moved with his iconic dance moves, a shocking moment turned an ordinary performance into one of the most talked-about concerts of his career. You won't believe what fell from him that night, an unexpected twist that changed everything. Stay tuned as we unravel the unbelievable story behind this wild moment in Elvis Presley's history. Make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more incredible stories about the king of rock and roll. Elvis's love for guns. Elvis Presley wasn't just the king of rock and roll, he was also an avid collector of firearms, with a fascination that seemed as larger than life as his career. This love for guns reached its peak during the 1970s, a time when his fame and influence were unmatched, and perhaps when he felt the greatest need for control and protection. Guns, to Elvis, were more than mere objects. They symbolized power, safety, and the thrill of living on the edge. As his fame continued to soar, so did his growing collection of firearms, which became an increasingly central part of his persona. Whether he was at home in Graceland or on the road performing for millions, Elvis had a deep and enduring love for guns that seemed to echo his rebellious and unpredictable spirit. In fact, Elvis owned over 32 handguns, along with other firearms, including shotguns and even a machine gun. It wasn't enough for Elvis to simply collect these weapons. He often gifted them to those around him, sometimes to close friends and other times to complete strangers. Imagine receiving a pistol from the king himself. Such a gift wasn't just about generosity. It was about sharing a piece of his daring lifestyle with those he trusted or admired. His inclination to give away guns reflected a unique side of his character, a mixture of warmth and unpredictability that kept even those closest to him guessing. But his fascination with guns didn't come without its risks, and one night, things took an unexpected turn on stage. What happened next would become one of the most shocking moments of his career. Stay tuned to find out how Elvis's love for firearms led to an unforgettable incident that left everyone stunned. Why Elvis carried a gun on stage. Elvis Presley wasn't just carrying guns for show. There were real and pressing reasons behind his decision to bring a firearm on stage. As his fame grew, so did the threats against him, and Elvis knew better than anyone that the limelight often cast a dangerous shadow. In the late 1960s and into the 1970s, the climate around celebrities was increasingly volatile, and Elvis had every reason to be cautious. Death threats were not uncommon, and an anonymous phone call warning of a plot to kidnap him added fuel to his fears. The shocking murders of actress Sharon Tate and others in California were fresh on his mind, a grim reminder of the dangers that lurked even for the most beloved stars. In response, Elvis took his personal security into his own hands, literally. He began carrying a small pistol on stage during his Las Vegas performances, where the risk seemed highest. This was the king protecting his throne, ensuring that he had a way to defend himself if things ever took a dark turn. To Elvis, carrying a firearm wasn't just about personal safety. It was about maintaining control in a world where control seemed increasingly hard to grasp. As his biographer Chris Hutchins put it, Elvis made it clear that if anyone tried to harm him, he wouldn't go down without a fight. If anyone fired at him, he intended to shoot back, Hutchins wrote, capturing Elvis's determination to protect himself at all costs. He even instructed his bodyguards to shoot anyone who might succeed in taking his life before the police could intervene, declaring, "I don't want anyone to become famous for shooting Elvis Presley." This wasn't merely paranoia, it was a calculated response to the very real threats that came with his fame. Elvis knew that his life was constantly under scrutiny, and while his fans adored him, there were always those who wished him harm. Carrying a gun was his way of taking a stand against those threats, a symbol of his resilience and his unwillingness to let fear control him. What happened next would become one of the most talked about moments in Elvis's career. Stay tuned to find out how turned this shocking mishap into yet another unforgettable chapter of the King's life. The shocking moment. The energy in the Las Vegas showroom that night was electric. Elvis Presley was in his element, feeding off the cheers of thousands of fans, each one hanging on his every word, his every note, his every move. The spotlight shone down on him as he strutted across the stage, sweat glistening on his brow, his voice carrying the passion that had earned him the title of the King of Rock and Roll. He was mid-performance, delivering his signature dance moves that had always driven his audience wild. The air was thick with excitement as Elvis's larger-than-life charisma enveloped the room. But amidst the flashing lights, the rhythm of the music, and the euphoric screams of his fans, something truly unexpected happened, a moment so shocking that it would be talked about for years to come. In the middle of an especially energetic twist, Elvis's audience was stunned when they saw an object fall from the king's boot. It wasn't just any object. This was a small, loaded semi-automatic pistol. The gun slipped from Elvis's boot, clattering to the floor in a flash of metal and sliding across the stage towards his rhythm guitarist, John Wilkinson. In that split second, time seemed to slow down for those watching. The cheers of the audience turned to a collective gasp as eyes widened, unsure if what they had just seen was real. The glitz and glamour of Elvis's stage presence took a sudden, dramatic turn. The gun slid across the polished stage floor, stopping right near Wilkinson's feet, who stared at it in shock. It was a moment of pure disbelief. What had just happened? This was Elvis Presley, the king, seemingly untouchable, yet here was a loaded gun at the edge of the spotlight, the unexpected and dangerous intruder in the middle of the show. The crew backstage sprang into action, and among them was Sam Thompson, one of Elvis's trusted bodyguards. Meanwhile, Wilkinson, who reportedly did not like guns at all, had to keep his composure, though his discomfort was evident. How would Elvis handle this sudden twist? Would the audience's shock turn to chaos, or could the king turn this potentially disastrous moment into just another part of his iconic performance? The answer lay in Elvis's reaction, a reaction that would define the legend further. What happened next became the stuff of legend, and you won't believe how Elvis managed to keep his cool and deliver a performance no one would ever forget. The reaction. As the gun slipped from Elvis's boot and slid across the stage, the audience's reaction was a mix of emotions. Some fans, caught in the euphoria of Elvis's performance, barely noticed the small object skidding across the floor, while others, especially those in the front rows, wore expressions of confusion and concern. The bright lights and pulsating music may have masked the reality for many in the room, but for those who did see it happen, the confusion was unmistakable. Was this part of the act? In an era before social media, the rumors of what had just transpired began swirling right then and there, as whispers moved through the audience like a wave. It was a jarring contrast to the energy of the music, a reminder that beneath the glittering spectacle, Elvis was grappling with real fears that even his legendary presence could not always conceal. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, Elvis's trusted bodyguard Sam Thompson was already in motion. He moved quickly yet quietly, sneaking onto the stage to retrieve the gun before the situation could escalate. John Wilkinson, Elvis's rhythm guitarist, watched as the weapon came to a halt near his feet. Wilkinson, known for his aversion to firearms, must have felt a moment of unease as the gun lay on the stage, a stark reminder of the risks that came with working alongside a man as famous and as vulnerable as Elvis Presley. After the incident, Elvis made a decision. The small .25 caliber pistol was simply not worth the trouble. It had failed him at a critical moment, slipping free in the midst of his legendary dance routine, and it was time to let it go. Elvis's decision to discard the gun was perhaps an acknowledgement that even though he wanted to be ready for anything, he needed to ensure his performances remained as smooth and safe as his fans deserved. But this wouldn't be the last time that Elvis's fascination with firearms led to a dramatic moment. There was yet another shocking incident involving the king and his guns, and you won't believe what happened next. Stay tuned to hear how Elvis's love for weapons created another unforgettable scene that left everyone talking. The second incident. But this wasn't the only time Elvis had trouble with his guns. The king's love for firearms would lead to yet another unexpected and almost cinematic incident. This time, it was during a trip to New York State. It all began as Elvis boarded his private plane, preparing to make his entrance for yet another highly anticipated performance. Despite stern warnings from his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, to leave his firearms behind, Elvis couldn't resist bringing 2 small pistols along for the ride. Parker had always been strict about keeping anything that could jeopardize their carefully curated public image away from Elvis's side, but the king was not one to follow orders, even if they came from his manager. Elvis was determined to keep his weapons close. Perhaps it was a matter of security, or maybe it was just a part of who he was. So, against Parker's explicit orders, Elvis strapped on the pistols, tucking them into the waistband of his karate-style outfit, ready to take on whatever the world threw at him. The drama unfolded as soon as the plane landed. Elvis, dressed in his trademark flamboyant style, stepped confidently out of the aircraft, his presence commanding attention from the gathered crowd below. The stairs were steep, and as he descended with his usual swagger, something completely unexpected happened. The 2 semi-automatic Colt pistols slipped from his waistband and tumbled down the stairs. The metallic clatter echoed across the tarmac as the guns bounced their way down, landing in full view of stunned onlookers. For a moment, there was silence, a collective breath held by the fans and onlookers as they processed what had just happened. But in true Elvis fashion, he barely missed a beat, brushing off the mishap as though it were nothing more than a misplaced scarf. Law enforcement officers nearby quickly stepped in, handing Elvis his fallen weapons with a sense of deference, as if this was just another part of the king's mystique. It was a moment that encapsulated Elvis's unpredictable nature, an unforgettable blend of glamour, danger, and defiance, reminding everyone that the king of rock and roll was never one to play by the rules. Elvis's attitude toward guns. Elvis Presley's fascination with guns was emblematic of his complex personality, a mix of confidence, rebellion, and the need for control in a world where he was constantly on display. To Elvis, guns were more than just tools of protection. They were symbols of his independence and defiance, a way to push back against the pressures that came with being one of the most famous men in the world. These incidents, where firearms slipped from hiding places during pivotal moments, painted a picture of Elvis as someone who lived on the edge, embracing the thrills and risks that came with his larger-than-life persona. He wasn't afraid to blur the line between his private self and his public image, and carrying a gun, even on stage or in front of a crowd, was just another way that Elvis refused to conform. The king of rock and roll was unpredictable, and that unpredictability was a significant part of what made him such a captivating figure. He thrived on walking the fine line between charisma and danger, reminding everyone that beneath the sequins and stage lights was a man who wouldn't be controlled by anyone, not even his own fears. What made these moments even more extraordinary was that Elvis never seemed to face any real consequences, even when his firearms were in plain view. Despite the laws and social norms that might have seen others reprimanded or fined, Elvis always emerged unscathed, as if his very presence granted him immunity. Law enforcement officers and even bystanders seemed to look the other way, either out of respect for his status or simply because they were just as starstruck as his fans. In one instance, after the pistols tumbled down the plane's stairs, the nearby police officers merely retrieved the guns and handed them back to him without a word of admonishment. Elvis had a way of bending reality. Rules and regulations didn't seem to apply when the king was involved. These moments weren't just anecdotes. They were glimpses into the extraordinary privilege that his fame afforded him. The world seemed willing to forgive, overlook, or even admire his recklessness, adding to the aura of untouchability that surrounded him. It was this mix of charm, audacity, and sheer star power that allowed Elvis to live by his own rules, making his life a spectacle that no one could turn away from. The king was never one to follow the rules, even when it came to guns, and these moments only served to add to the larger-than-life legend of Elvis Presley. He was fearless, unpredictable, and endlessly entertaining, a man who lived for the thrill of the moment, whether it was on stage thrilling a crowd or behind the scenes pushing the boundaries of what anyone thought he would do next. The stories of Elvis's wild encounters with firearms remind us that he was not just a performer, but a living symbol of rebellion and charisma, someone who always kept us guessing and coming back for more. The king's legacy is one of music, drama, and unforgettable moments, some planned and others entirely spontaneous, like a gun sliding across the stage in Las Vegas, or pistols tumbling down the steps of a plane. If you enjoyed this glimpse into the wilder side of Elvis Presley and want to hear more of the unbelievable stories that make up the legend of the King of Rock and Roll, be sure to like this video, share it with fellow fans, and subscribe to our channel for more of the stories that keep the legend alive.